Imposter syndrome convinces you that your uncertainty means that you don't belong.
When you've legitimately earned your place, but you can't fully believe it. So you downplay your accomplishments, you are convinced someone's gonna find you out, and you secretly think that everyone else has it together more than you do. Am I doing it right? Do I really belong here? Even with familiarity, you still have to prove yourself to yourself and to others, and that pressure doesn't just magically disappear because you grew up around it. Imposter syndrome is normal, and almost everyone feels it at some point, and the point is to not let it control your decisions or confidence. Welcome back to Project Confidence.
Hello, hello.
So today's episode is actually one that came straight from you guys, our listeners. When we were building this podcast, we asked on Instagram and Facebook what topics you wanted us to cover.
And imposter syndrome was one of the most requested topics.
It really was, over and over again. And what stood out to me was that every single person who requested it was female.
Yeah, and at all different stages of their career. So some were still in dental school, some are new grads working as associates, and then others were people who already owned their own practices, but were still struggling with self-doubt.
Yeah. And, which tells us, I think, something really big. Imposter syndrome isn't something that you necessarily grow out of once you get your diploma, or your first paycheck. It's sneaky. It can show up at any time. And I think it's something that we need to talk more about in dentistry, because this career, as amazing as it is, has a way of making you feel like you are never quite good enough.
Yeah. Let's start with basics, like what it is, and where it came from.
Is it just me, or did we not hear about this at all growing up?
I personally had never heard of it until maybe a few years ago.
So, one day we woke up and every influencer life coach was talking about it, right? It was everywhere.
You're not wrong. But I actually did a little Google research, and it turns out that it has actually been around a little longer than we have.
Ew. Okay. I think it's great that Google's picked up on this, but what did we do before Google existed? How did we ever get our information?
I feel like the answer to this question is the Dewey Decimal System. But if I go deep dive into explaining what that is, we're going to lose about 90% of our listeners.
People still use that?
I have no idea.
Okay. Back to imposter syndrome.
Okay. So imposter syndrome was first described back in 1978 by psychologists Pauline Rose Clance and Suzanne Imes.
1978 isn't that old.
It's Gen X.
And what are we?
Millennials, technically. Well, probably elder millennials.
Okay, so imposter syndrome is Gen X. Go on.
So Clance and Imes actually called it a phenomenon because at the time they didn't consider it a syndrome because it's not a mental disorder. It's just a pattern of thinking.
So basically, it's when you've legitimately earned your place, but you can't fully believe it. So you downplay your accomplishments, you are convinced someone's going to find you out, and you secretly think that everyone else has it together more than you do.
I think it's important that we make the distinction between being unsure and then feeling like a fraud.
Oh, for sure.
Because everyone feels uncertain sometimes, but imposter syndrome convinces you that your uncertainty means that you don't belong.
And in dentistry, that's really dangerous because there's already a massive learning curve. Mistakes don't equal incompetence, but tell that to the little voice in your head whispering, wow, you really shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah, especially when all the education that you've had leading up to it was built around checklists, rubrics, and passing competencies that were based on ideal conditions that you'll never see again once you graduate.
Exactly, because on a type-it-on, everything is predictable, but the real world is a totally different beast.
I mean, Amri, do you remember the first time that you felt imposter syndrome in dentistry? Was it in school or afterwards?
It was definitely in dental school. I remember sitting in pre-clinic surrounded by people who seemed like they were born to prep teeth, like you. Remember those days? And I was just trying to figure out what end of the instrument to hold. It felt like everyone else had some secret manual that I missed.
Same thing.
And then even when I started taking on leadership roles, that feeling didn't fully disappear. It just showed up in different ways. The difference was I learned to recognize it for what it was instead of letting it define me. And what's helped is realizing that most of us feel that way at some point, even the people who look the most confident from the outside.
See, I would have thought that it would be impossible for someone like you to experience imposter syndrome because you literally grew up around dentistry. I always thought, and probably other people think this too, that if you were essentially born into something, that there would be this sort of built-in sense of comfort and ease that you have with the field that maybe other people wouldn't have.
Honestly, I get why people would think that, but it's definitely not immune to me. I think growing up around it gave me exposure, but it also set a bar that sometimes feels impossible to reach, right? There's always this voice in my head asking, am I doing it right? Do I really belong here? Even with familiarity, you still have to prove yourself to yourself and to others. And that pressure doesn't just magically disappear because you grew up around it.
Yeah, I guess I never really thought of it that way, but it totally makes sense now with the way that you explained it.
How about you?
I was probably the poster child for imposter syndrome in dental school. I had a really hard time, you probably remember, with all those biomedical science courses in D1 and D2. And okay, who are we getting? D3 and D4 too. And every time I finally started feeling somewhat confident, then something new would be piled on. And I felt like I was just treading water for 4 years straight.
It was exhausting, right?
Absolutely. And then meanwhile, we had these classmates who just made it look so effortless and they're freaking out that they got one question wrong on an exam. And meanwhile, I'm just like, oh God, I just hope I passed. I don't care what my score was.
And the people after the test were always standing right outside the room and waiting for people to walk out. And they're like, what did you put for?
Wait, don't even get me started on those people who can't.
The worst.
Honestly, graduation didn't even feel real to me.
Like the ceremony?
Yeah, it sounds really weird to say this now out loud after so many years, but honestly, like our dental school commencement was like this out of body experience for me. Like in the middle of all of the hugging people and then smiling for pictures and then saying goodbye to all of our classmates and professors. Like I could not shake this feeling that someone like out there was going to realize that I shouldn't be getting this degree.
There's probably people listening to this podcast right now thinking, oh my God, that's how I felt too.
Maybe wasn't even done with my requirements at the time of our graduation ceremony. Like I had not delivered my final RPD.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Then here is the wild part. I got the email on my phone that my final RPD had come back from the lab during the ceremony. And so I actually called my RPD patient during graduation while we were walking towards the stage.
Why don't I remember this?
Probably because it was a madhouse. It was Lincoln Center. Remember, if you're not familiar, is this huge event space in New York City. And there were like 1,200 other graduates, families, and guests like screaming out around us.
That's hilarious.
And so, yeah, if you actually look at some of our classmates' Facebook albums, back when people actually posted things to Facebook from the graduation ceremony, and you look at their photos or the pictures that their families took of all of us in this like sea of bright purple gowns in the audience, you can actually see me on the phone, frantically calling my patient and being like, Hector, his name was Hector. I can say that, right? Is that like a HIPAA violation?
I think you're fine.
It's not like I'm telling anyone his date of birth or where he lives or divulging the RPD design.
You're fine. We can totally check later. And if you're not fine, we'll just edit this out later in post-production.
All right. So anyway, I remember nothing about this denture case, to be honest. Full disclosure, I think it was something that was handed to me at the last minute by my junior because the patient I was supposed to do my final RPD case escaped from this court-ordered rehab facility or something and never came back for the delivery.
Oh, Jesus. I remember that.
That is another story for another episode.
This is the stuff we remember from dental school, people.
Honestly, when I think about all the stuff that was thrown at us during that chapter of our lives, and then we still managed to handle it somehow, and then everything worked out eventually, that's something that really helps me when I have my imposter syndrome moment.
Exactly. And just thinking about how far we've come and everything we learned from the journey helps so much. Imagine if more of us decided to believe that we belong and to say, I worked for this and I've earned this and I'm good at what I do.
Yeah. Alona Mayer, the U.S. rugby player?
Is she the one with the pink lipstick?
Yeah, the
red lipstick?
red lipstick. Yes,
Red
her.
lipstick.
Yeah. I watched an interview with her when she was asked about how she deals with imposter syndrome. And she was like, I don't have imposter syndrome. I don't know what that is.
Wow. That's powerful. I mean, that should be a mantra.
Exactly. And she was probably just answering the reporter's question at the time. But I remember thinking, damn, like she just completely shut that down. And I thought, like, is it just really that simple?
You mean to just reject the idea of imposter syndrome? That's a flex, right? To just say, that concept doesn't exist to me. I don't know what that term you're talking about is. So I'm just going to not even let it occupy any space in my consciousness.
Yes. And like, not to completely nerd out here and go down a spiral, but I took a linguistic anthropology course in undergrad, and there's actually a name for that idea.
There is?
Yeah. So it's called linguistic determinism. And basically the theory claims that if a word or like this grammatical category doesn't exist in a language, then the concept that's associated with it cannot exist or be conceived by its speakers.
That's kind of wild.
Most people reject this philosophy in general because if you're someone who speaks multiple languages like you or me, then you know that there are definitely words that exist in one language that maybe don't exist in the other, but then the actual feeling and the idea definitely exists in reality.
It's fascinating.
I mean, my favorite example of this is this Japanese word kuchi, which literally translates into lonely mouth, is meant to describe the physical state where you aren't hungry, but you go looking for something to eat anyway because you're bored. And your default factory setting is, oh, I should go get something to eat.
That's hilarious and also something I have definitely experienced despite not being Japanese.
Oh, yeah, me too. Kuchi is 1000% the reason I'm not a size zero.
But back to how that relates to imposter syndrome, you're right. There's something to be said about just intentionally pushing those intrusive thoughts about not being good enough aside and just saying, nope, I'm just not going there. This negativity doesn't get to take up real estate in my brain.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds a lot like fake it till you make it, but then I think it's really deeper than that, right? Linguistic determinism essentially proposes that your language shapes your thoughts, and that I buy. That's why therapists and life coaches and psychiatrists are always telling their clients to practice positive affirmations. Just rethink the words that you do use to describe what you're seeing and feeling, because you can intentionally shift your mindset based on the language about it.
It's a practice, right? You have to train your brain to see proof of your competence, reflect on your progress.
Something that really helped me was having friends outside of dentistry as well, because especially in those first few years after graduation, like I would go to a happy hour or a dinner with my non-dental friends and then vent to them about like an incompetent office manager or a patient with like unrealistic expectations. And think that they wouldn't be able to offer advice or relate to it, but they were actually able to take a really good, like objective look at these situations and then remind me that I was actually doing a lot better under pressure than I thought.
Totally. And I remember one night I was venting to a friend who has no connection to dentistry. They're in marketing about a patient who was being completely unreasonable about treatment costs. And I was spiraling, thinking I'd totally handled it wrong. And they just paused and was like, wait, you calmly experienced options, stayed professional, and didn't lose your cool. That's actually impressive. And it was simple perspective, but hearing that from someone outside of the field reminded me that I was doing a lot better than I gave myself credit for.
Yeah, that's incredible.
We spend so much time around other dentists that we forget how skilled we really are. And sometimes you need a friend who works in a completely different industry to hold a mirror up to your accomplishments and show you that you're so much more capable and in control than you think you are.
Yes. And that's why reflection matters. Oh, mirror pun. Um, so if you think about who you were 10 years ago and then how far you've come, like clinically, personally, and then emotionally, you realize that you've actually been leveling up all along.
It's like the mistakes that once made you question yourself are now the stories you tell to teach others.
Amrit, where do you go to find non-dental friends?
I've met some really great people through the gym that we've been member of for years, Orange Theory, like all across the country. It's a really wonderful, supportive community, I think, that links people from everywhere and actually all over the world. What about you?
In every city that I've moved to, and I moved to a lot of cities, I've actually made an effort to link up with people from my university alumni networks because it's so hard to make friends as an adult.
Tell me about it.
And honestly, like one of the perks of investing this much in your education is access to a wide alumni network. So you really just owe it to yourself to take advantage of it whenever you can.
Is there an NYU alumni club in the Bay Area?
There is, and it's actually really active. They always pick really cool restaurants to meet up at or group activities that I probably wouldn't have been motivated enough to try out on my own. And then if I want to talk to someone who works in tech or advertising or like some other field that I probably never have any sort of overlap with in my regular day-to-day work, then I have a way of connecting to these people because of where we went to school. And that gives us this shared background and this lived experience.
One of the things I'm most excited about my move home is to be more involved with those alumni events in the Metro New York City area. I'm on the alumni board for our school, NYU College of Dentistry, and they do so much, right, for graduates at all stages of their careers. Sports games, volunteering opportunities, cocktail hours. NYU covers it all, definitely.
So then what can someone do to overcome imposter syndrome?
Such a good question. I think it starts with perspective because by talking to people outside of dentistry, friends, family, anyone who can look at your situation objectively and remind you that you're handling things better than you think. And then celebrate small wins, even the ones that feel obvious.
Someone once advised me to keep a folder on my desktop called a brag folder and to save anything in there that was part of a really good day, like a screenshot of a good patient review or a positive faculty evaluation, or even just a picture of all my students when we're celebrating on match day. So not only is it a really good thing for soothing your ego on a bad day, but you do want to catalog all of that for when you work up the courage to ask for a raise or a promotion.
That is such a good idea.
Yeah, because we're all so busy and stressed and then focused on getting through our daily to-do list that we forget to stop and give ourselves credit for all the things that we got right and then the things that we got done.
Right. And finally, remember that imposter syndrome is normal and almost everyone feels it at some point. And the point is to not let it control your decisions or confidence.
Hey, you remember Dr. Lori Fleischer, our endo faculty at NYU?
Of course.
I mean, talk about like a force of nature, right?
Totally iconic.
Oh, that was very Kourtney Kardashian of you.
Why, thank you.
All right. So Dr. Fleischer, she keeps telling me to call her Lori, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to do that. I just can't, in my mind, she is an adult and I'm a child. Um, Gave me the best one liner about imposter syndrome that I still repeat to this day whenever I feel overwhelmed or I'm thinking that I'm going to fail at something. So I remember standing in the lobby of the fifth floor clinic or 5CDB and saying something like, like dental school is so hard, like dentistry is so hard, I'm just never going to make it. And then he actually gestured around the room at all the doctors and faculty supervising the students. And she'd go, Diana, I mean, look who else could do this. And inevitably, there'd be like a professor picking their nose or like falling asleep in the corner or wearing their lab coat inside out and like not realizing it, right? And the translation of this was, look, you don't have to be a genius to do this or even that smart or privileged or lucky. You just keep showing up with good intentions and you put one foot in front of the other and you're going to figure it out and get through it.
That is so Dr. Fleischer, and I love it. So, if you're listening and you're thinking, who let me be a dentist? Here's your answer. You did. You worked, you earned it, and you deserve your spot in this profession.
Yeah, I think that based off everything that we've talked about today, we can conclude that the best antidote to imposter syndrome is just to continue to seek out connection, whether it's to other people who've been in your shoes or people who can actively listen to your fears and doubts and offer support or empathy. And the more you share your story, the more you realize that you were never the only one feeling this way.
And hopefully, this conversation reminds you that imposter feelings are normal and you can reframe them as evidence that you're growing, stretching, and doing meaningful work.
Exactly. I mean, we talk about dentistry as a profession that's built on precision, but it's also built on progress. So imposter syndrome thrives in silence. So if we talk about it, mentor through it, and then remind someone else that they belong, we're helping them too.
And when all else fails, come back to this episode of Project Confidence.
That's right. Thanks for listening, for everyone, and we will see you next week.
Bye.